Hi, my name is Amanda Panacea, and you're listening to the Healer Revolution podcast. This is a community for self-healers, biohackers, practitioners, and any other helping professionals. You're in the right place if you're seeking conversations about how pain becomes passion, the connection between physical, energetic, mental, and our spiritual self, finding your body's ancient wisdom, the latest biohacking technologies, clinical research, and if you just want to nerd out about complex biochemistry and quantum physics. But this is also for entrepreneurs who seek infinite abundance and a supportive community. So pour a cup of King coffee or Sisters tea and let's join the revolution. Welcome, everyone. You're listening to the Healer Revolution podcast. I am your host, Amanda Panacea, and today I'm really excited to introduce one of my mentors, Dr. Jeff Thomas. He is a licensed naturopathic doctor and provides integrative medical approaches to a myriad of clinical presentations ranging from the most common to difficult and obstinate cases. He was also the medical educator and product development specialist for DesBio, and when we recorded this, he was still in that position. But he was someone who brought a lot of education to me in the last couple of years. He is just a brilliant mind and an incredible soul. You'll really get a feel for how passionate he is for helping other people and really interesting topics of conversation. So I really hope you enjoy the podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Healer Revolution podcast. I am your host, Amanda Panacea, and I'm super excited today to be getting to chat with someone who's actually been a mentor for me in the field of bioenergetics and homeopathy, is Dr. Jeff Thomas. So hi, Dr. Jeff. Thank you so much for joining.
Hello. I appreciate that chance to be here. Thank you.
Yes. So as I mentioned, you've done a lot of trainings for one of the companies I work with, Balance Health or CBH Energetics. And you've literally been able to train us on like any topic we request. So you have just such a vast knowledge of so many different fields, I guess you could say. Plus you do so much of the amazing formulations at DesBio. So I'm really excited today to learn all about your background, how you got into this, how you started working for DesBio, and just all of the nitty gritty of how you got here.
Absolutely. And thank you again for the introduction. Let me adjust my head to get it appropriate size so I can speak. But yes, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Is there any specific place you would like me to begin this story?
I've had people start from childhood. I've had people start from, anywhere that makes you feel comfortable. I personally, I love, as a therapist, I love listening to like somebody's story and how they explain it to people, because we could really put ourselves in so many different camps. We could explain our story as the victim, we could explain our story as the hero, and so I like to hear you, like, how you exactly think of it. So no
absolutely pressure. Well, with that was super helpful, so I appreciate that, because with such an open question, as you many places to go with that. I'm a military brat, and the reason I say that is because that was a significant influence on how I came to be where I am today. Like it or not, you're being uprooted and rerouted every 3 to 4 years, and sometimes in a completely different part of the planet. So it's a radical shift in your environment. For example, my life started in the Philippines. I was born on an island at a base that's no longer there because 4 years later or 5 years later, a volcano would erupt and cover the base. And so starting in a country that wasn't necessarily outright in America, you're automatically brought into it as a minority because you're surrounded by a different culture and a different ethnicity. And that's kind of the story of my life. Even though I may have been based on a military base, a lot of the time we lived off base. And so you're having to relearn different languages, and with different language comes different cultures, and with different cultures comes different customs. And so again, even though I spoke the American language, I was constantly being exposed and around different ways to live. And that immediately impressed upon me that there's more than one way to live. So you can start to see where this goes. That being said, though, not having known much about what to do with my life outside of the exposure to the military, I did the very thing that I knew, which was the military, 2 weeks after graduating high school. And so I went in and I worked with air traffic control as an electrician. Quickly, though, found out that being a dependent in the military versus active duty are so very different. Who would have thought? And so that career ended abruptly. It didn't work out very well. It wasn't really cut to be of service in that capacity. And so when I came out, I was just spiraling because I was shortly thereafter being removed from the military, coming back to the States. And then I was in Texas where my parents were residing at the time and just unsure because I'd spent my life overseas. Clearly, I wasn't there anymore and I wasn't in the military. So the two most familiar things in my life had come to an abrupt end, which left this huge open-ended question, what next? And my parents threatened to kick me out in 30 days if I didn't find anything to do. And this conversation happened in a restaurant. It's like, well, I'll apply for a job in this very restaurant then. And there started my culinary journey. Shortly after beginning the cooking journey, I went to culinary school and became a chef. And fascinating place to spend a lot of time and energy because you get to interact with what it is that you're learning about. You're cooking, you're processing, you're cooking, you're smelling, like all the senses are stimulated. But I recognized very quickly, like you're salting everything and you're putting sugar on everything. And there's really no consideration for the health aspect of what you're doing. It's more about the aesthetic. Does it taste good? And so I started to wonder, well, is there a more sustainable way to build a relationship to food? That then led me to start to study nutrition, where I got my bachelor's of science in nutrition. Now I started to round out my understanding. But what was also interesting about this is this journey into college was completely unexpected. I had never actually anticipated going to college, nor wanted to go to college, but I had run out of options and just thought, this seems to be the normal expected thing for young adults to do. So sure, let's go see what this is about. And I never really believed in myself. I didn't think of myself as especially smart. I didn't think of myself as especially apt. And I had very little confidence. And so what school allowed me to do was see that I actually had something to offer the world. Because prior to that, I was really questioning my value. And I was beginning to see that through this process of learning, I was being recognized as someone who had something to offer. And that was information. And I really liked being on the receiving end of that validation. So I was like, this is great. I'll just stay in college as long as I can to be on the receiving end of such wonderful compliments. Quickly, though, I began to approach the end of my second degree. And usually most nutritionists, dietitians end up in hospitals. At least that was what I was told. That just seemed like a really not so great idea for me. I didn't want to be in such another structured setting. So they had mentioned shortly before graduation, hey, there's these really weird, strange nature cure docs doing rehydration therapies in developing countries. And here's the very strange thing about that story. Nothing about that really associated with anything I had known. I had never heard of nature cure docs. I'd never heard of rehydration therapies. So it didn't like ping this recollection or this memory, but what it did, fascinatingly enough, is it quickened my spirit, which is a really interesting thing when you've been in academia for so long, because you're used to navigating your decisions with your head and trying to rationalize, do I do this? Do I not do this? And if I do, what's the benefit to me? There was none of this going on. After hearing those words, there was a visceral response is the only way that I can describe it. There was a part of me that said yes, but my head's like, but what did we just say yes to? We have no idea what they're talking about. And so it literally became a leap of faith. I just thought, salt rehydration therapy, nature cure, no, nothing about that. Yes, let's do that. And so then I had to, like, what is this really naturo path? Like, what a weird word that was. Like, I was learning all these strange words and it was just stimulating to learn a whole new language again. And so I applied to all these different schools and I was like, OMG, this is medical school. There's no way I could ever achieve that level of education. So I applied to all of them thinking if I cast a broad enough net, maybe one of them will feel sorry for me. Again, that was just my thinking at the time. And truth be told, I got accepted to all of them. Wow. And there was this sense of validation. Wow, there must be something really cool about what I'm offering or how I'm presenting myself. So let me really follow in that and trust that and now really connect with that and own it. So when I finally started my naturopathic program at Bastyr University, there was the beginning of this sense of I am. There was the beginning of I have something to offer the world. Now, I didn't exactly know even then what I was diving into, but again, there was this visceral, whole body yes to this thing that I knew nothing about, and I was just intrigued by that. And so I actually didn't sit with my first naturopathic doctor until I had been in naturopathic college for 2.5 years. So again, it was just this huge leap of faith. And then shortly after graduating, I would work in the supplement industry for a while. Biogenesis was the first company. And then after Biogenesis, I would start working with Des Bio. And so kind of in short, the coming to academia and then the weaving of naturopathic medicine with supplementation is what brought me here. I didn't speak too much about clinically or how I work with certain patients or how I got to that, but that's how I got to where I am from an educational standpoint.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's exactly what I was looking for. But the thing I really like that you pointed out is that how much your intuition of the body actually played a role with the decisions that you made. And that's something I think so many people struggle with, is that mind-heart disconnection. And well, my brain is saying, don't become an artist, you'll make $0. But my heart is saying, this is what I really have to do to be happy. And so that's amazing that you actually got into this field just listening to that little voice of the body. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm glad that was able to land appropriately. There were a lot of words that just came out. So I'm glad that that's, I think, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Just speaking to the clinical experience, I started essentially with naturopathic oncology. So initially, much of what I was focused on was just adjunctive care to cancer. And it was really intriguing because it was highly complex, and you're working with this really vulnerable population who's been disenfranchised with the conventional approach to managing their care. And they're just given these choices that make you wonder, really, this is the best I have to look forward to? I can either have parts of my body removed and or have some version of sickness the rest of my life. That's what I have to work with here. And I was intrigued by alternative approaches to supporting these people while still preserving some quality of life. But what I will say fascinated me most about that was the ability to start having difficult conversations and working with people in such a fragile yet profound way. Because when you're sitting with someone and you're having this conversation about a fork in the road as to where they are, depending on the severity of their situation specific to cancer, sometimes the question is, are we looking at quantity of life or quality of life? And you just sit there and you watch the wheels turn. And to be in such a, I don't even know how to characterize that space because it's emotional. There's a sense of finality. There's a sense of mortality. And then it's peppered with hope and fear and uncertainty. And when you put that all together, it's just real. And I think that's what really drew me to working with some of these more complicated chronic cases, was the opportunity to just sit in discomfort and start to learn how to become comfortably uncomfortable. Because as you might imagine, that can permeate us. That lesson can permeate all aspects of life and really benefit us in a variety of ways. Mm-hmm. I need to continue learning, though. From there, I would then start working at another clinic, and they needed a naturopathic doctor to address women's health. So as you might imagine, you can look at me now and tell that I'm not a woman. So I'm a man of color. And so what was fascinating about that space was, I don't have ovaries. I've never menstruated. I've never conceived. But yet here I am educating women about those very things. And I was just blown away at the honor of it, the trust that came with a woman sitting across from a man, listening to what I had to say. And there was just a sense of honor that came with that kind of interaction. And I realized the influence that as a provider, we were able to have with that, but then the responsibility that comes with that. And so from there, I started to kind of just go to different clinics to see where there was just a different opportunity to learn something new. And what I was finding is, regardless of what clinic I went to, as you can relate, and I'm sure many of your listeners can, we're not usually the first provider they come to. Usually we're at the bottom of a very long list. And what's kind of cool about that is usually through the conventional assessment, you ruled out the usual suspects. So you have this really cool space to kind of explore and see what may be causing their health picture. And that's what led me to, in this case, Lyme disease. Because as you know, it's what's called the great imitator. So it may mimic autoimmune disease. It may mimic allergies. It may mimic chronic pain or chronic fatigue caused by other things that conventional docs might presume to be the case. But once they've ruled those out, then you all too are familiar with the process of either the client or patient being discounted or minimized or told it's in your head, or we don't know what to do with you, or there's nothing wrong with you. So when these patients are coming to me, again, there was there was a palpable sense of hopelessness, very similar to what I had encountered early on in my practice. And there's just within me, when I'm in that space, there's a desire to want to help. And so I felt called to start to really focus on working with these people, because there was just a rawness to the interaction. But what it also taught me was how little boundaries I had early on too. Because as you can imagine, as an early provider in your career, you're all passion. You're all, what's the word I want to say? You're all knowledge, but not as much wisdom. You know, that takes time to actually catch up. So as a result, you're giving so much of yourself without understanding the cost or the toll that comes at. So this is where I began to learn of reciprocal learning that was going on between my patients and I. Prior to that point, I felt responsible for their care because, as you know, they come to you relying on you to treat them, to cure them, to make them better. But what this exchange of energies was teaching me was we're in a partnership here. We're in a collaboration, and we each play a part. And so how can I better articulate that to understand that the best outcomes are going to be realized when we work together, but we also have to know the part that we play. And so working with things like Lyme disease and mold, given the complexities, given the sense of hopelessness, given the frustration, there was multiple layers of the conversation. You know, you're talking about symptoms, you're talking about labs, but you're also talking about an individual who wonders, will their life ever be the same again? You're talking about an individual who may be pregnant and they're concerned about what they're dealing with and if that may be passed on to their unborn child. You know, again, these very visceral conversations. And one of the most powerful things I've learned in this year being 10 years of practice is being okay saying, I don't know. And I think that's counterintuitive, right? When you spend 10 years in academia and you spend the rest of your life paying for it, you've been conditioned to believe that you're going to have all the answers or you should have answers. And I've recognized that, no, actually, that's not really the case at all. And some of the most helpful things I've said to people is, I don't know, but we can try to figure this out together. That doesn't always end well, but it at least allows me to lay my head on my pillow at night and feel good about, or as best as I can, to be honest, because you don't always feel good telling people you don't know. Yeah. But rest having known that you were authentic in a very uncomfortable situation. So that's what draws me to these more complicated cases, is it's an invitation to see things as they are and just have to kind of accept things on one hand and be okay with that, while also gently providing hope.
Right.
Reason.
Yeah, I love that. And something that I think is so profound about saying, I don't know, is I like to invite the question back to them. What do you think? Because oftentimes they have an answer. They can answer that question. Well, I think, and then whatever you think is going to be true. So it's more important what you think about this situation than what I think about this situation.
That's so true. You know what's so cool about that question is when they've never heard it before from their health provider. They're like, hold on, you want to know what I have to say? You mean what I have to say is valuable? It's not going to be discounted or discredited or told it's wrong. I mean, there's just such a sense of, I do know something. Again, that validation, that affirmation. And when you see that, which comes across, I believe, as an invitation to participate, there's just a sense of worth that just seems to illuminate. Mm-hmm. Very cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's part of some of the work that I do is developing that sense of intuition. So if you've outsourced it to every 500 doctor you've seen, let's work on bringing it back in and strengthening it.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful thing. I'd be curious just if we can go back and forth with that. Yeah. What have you found maybe in a more succinct, condensed fashion to be effective ways to do just that?
Well, in my practice, I do a lot of the nervous system work. So we'll start with, like, every person's different, obviously, but we start with just education on like some of the language. And I also really love somatics or somatic experiencing, because it develops listening to what's going on in your body and not resisting it. So instead of seeing like, oh, I have a headache, something's wrong, going down that spiral of, I got to figure it out. I got to call this, I got to do this test. I've been having these headaches and it's not going away. Just inviting in and understanding why the body might be doing that. Let's check my emotions. Let's check my stress in my life. Let's check the thoughts I'm having. and just having like a framework for understanding how the body is reacting and how the body's like adapting to your environment.
That's
And
so.
that's where we start. And then from there, depending on how fast somebody starts to pick that up, we can get into more trauma work, or I work with a lot of belief systems, because like I said, whatever I think about this situation means nothing if you don't feel the same way. So right. We have to be on the same page, like you said before. That's very collaborative, working through these big chronic illnesses and presentations.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I love what you said about the somatic approach. I ask patients, because it largely informs how we're going to work together, how they define health. Very open-ended question. Sometimes they don't even know where to begin. So I give them multiple choice answers. A being, it's the absence of disease, or B, it's freedom from limitation. So you can imagine, based off of what you just said, for the individual that's through mindfulness observing the headache, as long as that headache is present and they're identifying health as option A, which is the absence of disease, they're going to perceive in the presence of something that is considered wrong or uncomfortable, or to whatever degree you want to reference that, I'm not well. And then they start to identify entirely with that belief because the presence of that symptom. Whereas, especially with chronic illness, I think of how I work with chronic illness very similar to grief. We're looking to achieve a new normal. Things may not be what they once were. That in and of itself, as you know, is going to perpetuate a grief process. Mm-hmm. Whether we're talking about what's happening in our body or what we're able to do with our body. And so from there, can they then embrace a new normal? The obvious question is, well, what's that going to look like for me? Time will tell. But the idea is to be able to some degree, let go and accept, surrender, if you will. Does that make sense in terms of how we try to cultivate a new definition of health?
Yeah. And one of my mentors, she said something so profound a couple years ago that I say to everyone is, your identity cannot be tied with your health, because it is going to decline. You're going to get old.
Right.
So we have to figure that out first.
Right. Yeah. And it's really, I mean, on one hand, right, we can relate to that, but when the health symptoms are so significant and they're impairing your activities of daily living, it's really difficult to subscribe to that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So I think we have our work cut out with those folks a lot of the time. And I don't know about you, but I end up in a gentle way having that same conversation in different words many, many times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely, you really have to, because otherwise you're just chasing lab values and symptoms. You're never going to get anywhere. It's so much deeper. You have to have these big conversations about belief systems and mindset. It's just part of dealing with the whole human from a holistic approach.
Right. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, but recognizing we're more than numbers on a page, I think, is a big reason why I was initially drawn to homeopathy. Mm-hmm. And so, again, not wanting to get too far, but what I loved about homeopathy was the very thing you touched on. And it was a modality that I learned early on, but took some time to really relate to and identify and own as my own as a practitioner, that it treats the whole person. And it doesn't just treat a number on a page or a symptom. And there was something really profound about that, but also at the same time, really difficult to try to convey. Because coming in, for example, with a very specific physical complaint like brain fog, and you're saying, here's this remedy that's going to treat the whole person, what they really want to know is it going to help my brain fog or not? And so to try to explain to them in a roundabout way, yes, but the way that we're going to get there may be a little bit different, I find to be an ongoing work in progress.
Yes, I agree. And if you could kind of backtrack and explain what even is homeopathy.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. That's why I want to be careful about that. So let me be honest with you as to how I came into the understanding of homeopathy. Mm-hmm. For naturopathic school, I had had no prior exposure to complementary alternative medicine, especially being in the military. Here's some ibuprofen. If that doesn't work, chew on 3 more and we'll figure it out later. And if that doesn't work, well, it's in your head. Like many people, that was my upbringing. And so that's all I really knew, and was very regimented in sort of this black and white conventional approach. And so when I sat down and I heard about homeopathy, I was so very skeptical. And so I came into it from the standpoint of, if I wasn't paying so much money for this, I probably wouldn't sit in this classroom right now and listen to this because this sounds ridiculous. And just starting from that place, I want to emphasize, because it wasn't just like I came in there, they poured the Kool-Aid and I guzzled it down. No, I really had to work through my biases and my preconceived notions of what I thought medicine and healing should look like. And that was kind of what homeopathy helped me to do, was deconstruct what I thought healing should look like. And so when I came into homeopathy, how it was explained to me was that here's this modality that's been around for hundreds of years, and it's based off of the principles of like curing like. And what's kind of fascinating about homeopathy as a modality, it was discovered kind of by accident, similar to the way that penicillin was discovered by accident. Basically, if I recall the story correctly, there was an individual that I think had some sort of heavy metal toxicity and had found that by being exposed to minimal amounts of the very same metal that was causing the sickness, there was this curious amelioration or improvement in symptoms. And they were just sort of flabbergasted by, hold on, is the very thing that's making me sick, although if I come into contact or administer in smaller amounts making me better, what is this business? And so I think that's how the field was born. And what I found fascinating about learning from that is that it was just completely new, completely unlike anything else I had ever heard before. And I want to give credit to my instructors because they were very passionate. And I think when you have an instructor that's passionate and believes in what they do, it carries through the presentation because they believe in it with all of their body and soul. And I think it was their passion and their experience that slowly started to wear down my resistance. Because as you know, I think for me and many other people, when you're being asked, when your belief system is being challenged, there's kind of this identity crisis that happens. If it's not what I thought it was, well, then what is? And if that's not what I thought it was, then what does everything else mean in life, right? You start to really this whole existential breakdown going on. And that kind of happened, but I felt I was held by these very compassionate, caring educators who said, you're not alone. Many like you have been there before. So here's what it is. Homeopathy is essentially a low dose stimulus that when administered to the body, stimulates the body's innate ability to heal itself. That's the easiest way I could explain it. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. And so when you were learning about homeopathy, what were the things that finally made you feel like, oh, this stuff really works? It's very powerful.
Again, coming about it in the way that I did, my feet are kind of in the ground and just like, I don't know about this. And, just really just closed off to the whole thing, kind of resistant. But what I found, myself and a lot of people over, was you got a complicated case, hasn't responded to hydrotherapy, hasn't responded to botanical medicine, hasn't responded to talk therapy, hasn't responded to pharmaceuticals. Well, have you tried homeopathy? No. And at that point, especially when you're the provider for the patient and you run out of all these other tools in your toolbox that haven't worked, you're like, well, let's give it a go. It either works or it doesn't work. And it's generally very, very safe. Okay, sure, let's try this thing. And I would try it. And the results would speak for themselves. They would come back, and again, it's subtle. I'm not going to say it was like the silver bullet that provided this miraculous change, but it provided a larger degree of change within a shorter amount of time, better than any other modality did. And so there was a stark contrast. When nothing else worked, more often than not, on these complicated treatment-resistant cases, homeopathy would. And that's what started to just fracture that resistance and started to really plant some seeds of, well, there might be something to this. And I think from there was born more of an acceptance and then more of a consideration to using it and not just these treatment-resistant cases.
Got it. Yeah. And what got you into actually formulating? And then what does formulating even mean? How do you even do that?
Yeah, great question. I got into formulating initially just because I had started selling supplements. That was my introduction to the supplement industry, was just being a supplement sales rep. And then after having talked of supplements for so long and kind of knowing the ins and outs, I had one of the upper executive staff of a supplement company say, well, with your background in nutrition and now your basic science, Have you considered integrating that for the purposes of formulation? Pardon me. And I said, no, but that sounds really cool. So sign me up. And that started to begin the opportunity to formulate. And what it reconnected me with was that kind of artistic side of me that just got to create, similar to when I was in the kitchen. And I was like, now I'm cooking with plants, and I'm cooking with remedies. And I get this opportunity to kind of, in an artistic way, infuse the field of science with art, because I firmly believe that formulation is a combination of these fields. And typically you would think they're at odds with one another, one being left brain, the other being right brain. But to integrate them and to be able to have both parts of the brain working together, it scratched all the itches, if you will. And it was super cool. So today, how it looks when I formulate is I work with a colleague, Dr. Todd Rowe. And Dr. Todd Rowe is a board certified psychiatrist who also has his PhD in homeopathy. So he really is the brains behind the formulation, whereas I'm the practicing clinician. So what I do for him is I paint a picture. Let's just say we're talking about Lyme disease. Now, as you know, Lyme disease, being a tick-borne illness, can manifest in a variety of ways. What I try to do when we're formulating is look at the most common symptoms that would present from a musculoskeletal standpoint, from a neurologic standpoint, from a cardiac standpoint. So is there palpitations? Is there muscle spasms? Is there muscle pain? Is there joint pain? Is there brain fog? Just kind of selecting a few of the most common. And then, pardon me, what we do is we look to what's called the materia medica. These are homeopathic references. What they are very thick volumes that have pages and pages of different remedies that have been shown over time to be associated with the improvement or the amelioration of symptoms. So let's just say we pick one remedy like arnica. Arnica is a time-tested homeopathic as well as botanical that has been shown to be great for reducing musculoskeletal complaints. So we would use that remedy in the formula for the musculoskeletal complaint, and we would select other remedies, so on and so forth.
Have you had to give up coffee for health reasons? Maybe because of the stress it was putting on your adrenals, maybe because it was messing with your sleep, maybe because you felt terrible after drinking it, or maybe because you were told coffee had mold on the beans and you needed to stay away from mold. Well, what if I told you there's an organic, mycotoxin-free, quality coffee that contains reishi spores or Ganoderma lucidum? Ganoderma lucidum helps to modulate your immune system, adapt to stress, balance hormones, and doesn't give you the jitters or shakes like regular coffee used to. Sounds too good to be true, right? It's called King Coffee by the company Organo. And King Coffee came into my life when I was struggling with chronic hives, full body eczema, and mast cell activation syndrome. I hadn't drank coffee in years because it made me feel anxious, shaky, and clammy. So I had no expectations that drinking King Coffee would be any different. However, I decided to give it a try after seeing lots of amazing practitioners talk about the benefits of reishi online. I tried a 7-day sample and the chronic hives were gone by day 5. I was in shock. After that, I dove into the research on reishi and found that there are over 3,000 peer-reviewed PubMed clinical trials using reishi Ganoderma as an intervention. The company Organo also has a patent protected on their harvesting process. They double crack open the spore shells, which makes them up to 80% more potent than the body of the reishi, which is usually used in other reishi products. This also makes the spores 90% more bioavailable for your body to use. If you would like to try King Coffee, visit thehealerrevolution.myorganogold.com, or for a 7-day trial, you can check out my link tree on my Instagram at Amanda Panacea. Makes sense. And then, walk me through, what do you do? Put it in water and then dilute it? What does it look like? I'm so interested to know.
Yeah. So this is a really super cool process. Remember, at least at DesBio, all of our remedies are originated from source material. That means they're not imprinted, which we can speak to in a little bit if we need to. But what that means is, I talked about arnica. Arnica is a plant. We are actually deriving the original material from plant matter. So what we would do is we'd pick the plant parts, put them in like a beaker. You remember from like 7th or 8th grade. Pardon me. In that beaker, we put an alcohol solution and we allow it to sit. Over a period of weeks, the alcohol extracts the active constituents from the plant that are responsible for the therapeutic properties. We then take that solution and we take a portion of it. Let's just say, I would use mils. We might take 1 to 2 mils, a very small amount, like less than 1/8 of a cup. Think of it probably more along the lines of maybe like 1/4 of a teaspoon, 1/8 of a teaspoon, and then we dilute it with alcohol and then we shake it. So what I've done is 2 very crucial steps through what's called potentization. This is giving the medicine its strength. What I've done is I first diluted it and then I've succussed it. These are the 2 steps that are repeated over and over and over and over and over. And the more dilute the substance is, the more potent it is. And this is where a lot of people are like, that doesn't make any sense. And it makes a lot of sense for it not to make sense because it's unlike anything else you've ever heard before. It's the exact opposite. But it's true, and I'll repeat that one more time. The further away from the source material that the end product is, that is to say, the more dilute it's become over a period of dilution and shaking, dilution and shaking, dilution and shaking, the stronger it actually is. Wow. Now, when we speak of strength, strength is an interesting thing because what does strength actually mean in the context of a homeopathic remedy? What we're talking about is the more potent something is, depending on the strength, the more it will be able to target a specific layer of the healing. Think of it, as you know, and many of us have referenced, the body is like an onion. And depending on the strength, will determine which layer of the onion we're able to penetrate. Did I answer that question? Or handle that in any other way? Yeah, I'm happy to.
So you can kind of look at it as like the smaller the molecule, the deeper it can go in the onion.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's so much better than I just did. Yes.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense when you think about it that way. It's like a large molecule could maybe fit into the outer parts of the cell where the smaller it is, and get inside of cells and mitochondria and things like that.
Yeah, I like what you're getting at. I want to be clear though, in the way that technically getting in there though is through a process that is still growing in our understanding of it. Vibration, resonance, frequency is the way in which it's affecting change. That's typically the mechanism. Is there's like a low dose stimulus. That stimulus, if you wanted to unpack that word, is a frequency, is a vibration, and that's what's affecting, in that case, what you were saying, the mitochondria.
Got it. Perfect. Yeah. So Des Bio's been around for how long?
Close to 30 years now.
Wow, that's incredible. And they have been using homeopathy for, I assume, the whole time, right?
Correct.
Awesome. So I use bioenergetic testing, and that's how I was introduced to Des Bio. And something that was even more foreign to me than these complex homeopathic tinctures was the kits that you guys use called the series or symptom relief kits. And when I first heard of them, I was like, this is absolutely incredible. And come to find out, and using them, there's some of the more profound changes and turnarounds in people that I've worked with symptom-wise. So I would love for you to explain what those are, how they're different than other types of homeopathy, because you won't find those in any other company anywhere else.
That is very correct. And I appreciate the little pitch you just did there for me. Yes. Series symptom relief kit. I want to be clear as we talk about these things pertaining to Des Bio. I have to be cautious and take my practitioner physician hat off and put on my formulator representative of Des Bio hat. So my lingo might sound a little bit different as a result, given the regulatory concerns about how we talk about these things. So just work with me in that regard, and I apologize in advance. Now then, series symptom relief kits are homeopathic products. One of the big differences you're going to see is, a moment ago, I had referenced the example of a product being derived from a plant. Our series symptom relief kits are derived from actual pathogens. So H. pylori, Epstein-Barr, Aspergillus, just to name a few. We have 26, so there's quite a few more. What we do is, in a biohazard lab, we isolate that pathogen. And then through that same process of dilution and succussion, we prepare various potencies. And the idea is this. When you think about the body as an onion, what we're trying to do is gently penetrate each layer of the onion in a succinct fashion to mount the appropriate immune response. Each potency is designated to touch upon a different layer. So as you go through the entire process, you effectively have the opportunity to affect change, again, referencing that onion, in a holistic way, in a very systematic way over time. Over time, what I mean to say is we give the medicine every third day. That's the way this process works, is when you purchase these kits, it's a box with 10 different vials. Each vial has a couple mils, again, I would wager about a teaspoon, being 5 mils, of the solution being primarily alcohol. That's what we use as a preservative. And then within that, you have those infinitesimal amounts of the actual pathogen at various strengths. We provide a stimulus on day 1, and then we allow the stimulus to affect changes over time for a period of 3 days, and then we bump up the potency and deliver another stimulus. And over time, again, we're looking to address a different layer. Think of the different layers also being associated with different symptoms. The more superficial layers of the onion addressing welts, hives, rashes, bruises, muscle pain. The middle potencies, maybe joint pain that's been around for longer than 6 months, maybe some really aggressive or severe gastrointestinal complications or cardiac complications. And then eventually we get to the higher potencies, like what's called the M potencies. And this is a severe case of symptoms that haven't responded to many other therapies, that's been around for the vast majority of the patient or client's life. And it's those really dilute, albeit much more potent preparations that are going to penetrate those really deep layers. And so what I love about this protocol as a physician is that it's all been put together in this very user-friendly way. You know, I know, and your listeners know, when you're working with complicated chronic patients, it's like a whack-a-mole. You hit one thing and 3 other things come up and you're like, gosh, I thought I did that already. And then it comes back again. And if the patient starts to present in a manner of distress, it's not uncommon, and I feel this myself, to feel like, did I do something wrong? Did I do something right? Did it not work? What do I do? And then you're second guessing yourself, and then you're trying to figure out what to do. These kits have been put together in a way to greatly reduce confusion and ensure the appropriate outcomes. And again, technically, these outcomes, as I can speak to them from a regulatory representative standpoint, are just for the temporary relief of symptoms. I can say that there are additional benefits that can be realized by the providers out there, including myself, but it's beyond the scope of this conversation. So with that being said, I use these kits because after having treated a number of complicated chronic cases, I liked having a systematic, user-friendly approach that was easy for me, as well as my patients, to follow through and delivered consistent clinical results.
Yeah, they're pretty incredible. And, you know, even though they're homeopathy, they're absolutely no joke. Like, some people will be a completely different person after. Some people might have a really hard time with them and feel extra worse during, but then towards the end, they start to like have those symptoms kind of like peeling away. And again, they're like, wow, I'm so glad I made it through.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a really good, and I think that's a great interjection for an example here. So typically when you go through these kits, a great example would be, I'm working with this patient, she's in her 50s, really frustrated, sick and tired of being sick and tired. I'm the 500th physician she has seen, and she comes to me and she says, look, I've got this Lyme issue going on, what have you got for me? And her primary symptom was chronic fatigue and brain fog. And this was during the pandemic. And so all of her kids were at home, and they all were high needs kids with different mental health concerns. And so just really overwhelmed. And we took her through the kit. And I spoke before she went through the kit that, hey, it's not uncommon as we provoke change. The way I explain it to my patients is it kind of feels like kicking a hornet's nest. things might stir up a little bit and you might perceive that things are getting worse before they get better. Now, why is that? And the way I explain it to the patients is this: typically, one of the contributors to chronic illness is stagnation. The body doesn't have the appropriate pathways of elimination functioning optimally. Well, once you open up those pathways, it's all got to go somewhere. And if you didn't unplug the other congestions along the other pathways, whether it's the urinary system or the lymphatic system or the methylation aspect of what's going on, that can temporarily relieve symptoms, and then shortly thereafter, they feel worse. So what I let them know is that this is information. That means we're moving in the right direction. But based off of how you present, especially if it's like flu-like symptoms, we need a bit more detoxification support along the way. So she comes back and she says, it happened exactly as you said. And I can't thank you enough for letting me know beforehand that I might feel worse. So I was prepared. I wasn't caught off guard. And I knew that it was to be expected. That's such a huge thing when you can prepare your clients or patients for the possibility of an aggravation before it happens, so they're not caught off guard. So she trusted me and trusted that I was doing the right thing and knew what I was doing. So she came in and I said, this should subside in about 5 to 10 days, stay the course. And what I like about these kids is that usually happens around the 2nd to 3rd week. And by the end of the 1st month, I compared her baseline brain fog and chronic fatigue to where she was. And here's what happens a lot of the time. Patients are going to come in and say, nothing's different.
Yeah.
I don't change at all. And I'm really frustrated because I just spent all that money and time on this thing. Okay. Well, when you and I sat down, you said your brain fog was a 10 out of 10. You couldn't recall things. You were forgetting things mid-sentence. And it was really hard to remember your daily task. So let's go through each one of those. How often are you forgetting things mid-sentence? Oh, now that you mention it, it hasn't really been much of an issue. And I forgot about it because it wasn't happening anymore.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. It's so important to take a thorough baseline so that you can circle back and reflect, not say you're wrong and I'm right, but just gently reflect that this is how the nature of this medicine works. And what I loved about this therapy was that all she had to do was just to remember to take the series kits as prescribed. And within about 4 weeks time, we started to see a radical improvement. And when you're a stay-at-home mom in the midst of the pandemic, and you start to have a renewed sense of hope, when you don't know when the pandemic's going to end and you don't know when your kids are going to be able to go back to school, that for her felt like a second chance at life. And these therapies, by comparison to a lot of others, is relatively cheap. So for a relatively inexpensive price as compared to others, to give a person the experience of a second chance at life is literally priceless. And that's what I love about these series kits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that story. I have so many now friends that they were chronically ill, went through the series kits, and it inspired them to now become practitioners because of that whole experience. So
that's powerful.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that happens time and time again. So thank you. And thanks to DesBio for these. And just to recap, they have the series kits for like the big heavy duty pathogens. So the ones that tend to really knock people down or stay chronic and really give people a lot of trouble. So like Lyme and co-infections, Epstein-Barr, like you mentioned.
Yeah, all the herpes viruses. So if I were to unpack that, simplex, which has to do with oral ulcers, and then you've got the genital ulcers, which is HSV2. We've also got HHV6, which is another herpes virus. We've got cytomegalovirus. We've got Epstein-Barr. So it's nice because especially in the context of complicated chronic infections, these herpes virus tend to be reactivated. And the cool is you can do these kits simultaneously. So let's just say I've got a bacteria I've identified, I've got a virus I've identified, and maybe I've got another bacteria like H. pylori in the mix. What's super cool is once you know how to do one of these therapies, you know how to do them all because they're administered the very same way. So what's nice is when you're dealing with a patient who's overwhelmed already, I let them know that the learning curve is relatively steep, but it's short. You got to learn how to do one. And I understand it's going to take a minute. Once you know how to do that one, you know how to do all of them. And then we can conveniently kind of stagger them. And we have this truly holistic, multifaceted approach to addressing all the bad guys at once. And they really dig the convenience of that. And again, it's not take so much of this one and a different amount of this product and a different amount of this product at a different time of day. And they're just like, it's too much. It's too much. I just can't. The convenience of this in and of itself, I think, is a big reason why people are drawn to it, not to mention it works.
Yeah. Yeah, that too. So yeah, you mentioned you can stagger them. If you're taking them every third day, how many can you do at a time?
Yes, fabulous question. And I want to be clear. If you ask me and 10 other providers this question, you're going to get 12 different answers.
Okay.
Just know that we don't even agree amongst ourselves. I will only speak to myself. I will not go more than 3. And the reason for that is more often than not, the only reason people want to do more than 3 is because they're in a rush to get somewhere. And I let them know that that's understood. I get it. But with that increase in speed comes a much higher likelihood of adverse reaction. And so is it worth it? And I let them know that it's just really not. And so I'm apprehensive to recommend anything more than 3. My colleagues, some will say they go as high as 7 or 8 though. So know that there's a very big spectrum in that. I would rather have it low and slow win the race, and you can still function. The idea is that a lot of people can't realistically just stop living their life while they're on these therapies. They still need to go to work. They still need to care for their kids. They still need to care for themselves. And I have found that when you go above 3, it's really challenging to do those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And one thing I tell everyone is doing more faster does not equal getting better faster. Usually
Right.
the opposite.
And you know what's super cool about that thought? It aligns with the way that homeopathy works. Less is more.
Mm-hmm.
So if you really believe in the medicine, there's a bigger life lesson in the way that this medicine works. It's helping you to understand that less truly is more, and that doesn't mean it's not enough. You know, you could go a lot of directions with that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's hard to tell, especially high functioning people that burn out and then now they're sick or now they have chronic symptoms, to do less. Just do less. Don't try to fix it. And they're like, I don't know how.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful space to be though, because if they can give me that reaction, then I love that they feel safe to vocalize their disagreements with me. And again, it's an odd thing, I think, as a provider to encourage your patients to say, it's okay to disagree with me. And if anything, I encourage it because I really want to know how you feel about this. And so if they can actually be that transparent with me, a lot of the times I say, thank you. I really appreciate that kind of feedback. So maybe we need to sit with that for a moment and just talk about that a bit more. Yeah.
Exactly. Back to that, whatever you perceive to be true is going to be true. So if you think this is going to be very difficult for you, it probably will be.
Right. And that's, you know, you bring up another good point is, let's just say I have an individual that comes to me and they have, this is a really easy example. So I had an individual come to me and we had assessed them and determined that they had Lyme in the presence of chronic reactivated EBV. And I had recommended, because of the different pathogens present, I think the easiest thing for you to do because of the duration of your treatment would be this homeopathic modality known as serious symptom relief. And they said, I don't believe in homeopathy. So I don't know if I should do it, or I don't want to do it because I don't believe in it. And that's a fascinating space to be in, because I'm of the mindset that I want to honor your autonomy and your sense of trust and intuition. So even if you're coming at me in this kind of aggressive, resistant way, I want to honor that. And so when people come to me, even though I believe wholeheartedly in this modality, and they say, I don't believe in that, or I don't trust it, I honor that. I don't force it down their throat. I don't tell them they should do it. I let them know that there are trade-offs. Great. Then let's talk about the botanical approaches. Now, you may believe in that, but what you might not be aware of is that there's a few other things that come along with that belief, such as a higher risk of side effects for a longer period of time, and the financial piece might look a little bit different. Again, I'm not trying to alter their decision, but let them know, by not choosing homeopathy, what are they ultimately missing out on? And sometimes that redirects the conversation and other times it doesn't. But when people don't agree, I don't encourage, nor do I believe that they should put something in their body that they don't believe is going to be helpful.
Oh yeah, right. I mean, the placebo effect and all of the studies that include placebo effect, which is literally all of them, proves that. And nocebo effect. If you think something's going to be detrimental,
right,
there's a good percentage that it will be detrimental. So
right. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I appreciate that.
folks that are considering, because I talk with so many customers who are just so passionate and so excited that homeopathy is going to be the game changer for this individual, and they're just not there yet. Their patient or client is just not really receptive to that. And all I would say is, interestingly enough, in a roundabout way, they may get there if you can at least begin to agree that they're not there yet, instead of trying to change their mind. I have found that that works over a longer period of time. Hey, can we circle back? You know, we've tried these other things. I'm just not really digging what's been happening along the way. And so what do you think? Can we go back there? And it's just, you know, inside there's this like warm hug you give yourself, like, oh, this is so good.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So I'd love to know what your practice, what your day-to-day life looks now, since you're juggling a practice and formulation and all of that.
Yeah. So, you know, as someone who's a high functioning, to your point, individual with ADHD, I thrive off of variety. And so let me just give you an example. Is today Thursday? Yeah.
Yeah.
So this week alone, you know, on a typical day, I had an individual come in for an annual exam. I had an individual coming in for chronic exposures to mold. I had an individual coming in with chronic Lyme. And then I had an individual coming in for, I don't do fertility, but what I do is I screen preconception for environmental toxins. So it's for the purposes of supporting fertility by just looking to see what the body burden of toxicants is. So that's one example of what I do with a lot of people. And then the rest of my patients are all on various mental health journeys. And so there's a lot of therapy going on. And so my practice by no means is significantly focused on Lyme disease or even mold. On a given day, as you can tell, I never know who's going to walk through that door, and I kind of thrive off of that.
Mm-hmm. What is your astrology sign?
So my sun is Cancer and my moon is Sagittarius, and my ascendant is Libra or North Node.
I'm not an astrologer, but I think it's probably the Sag part of you that likes that, right?
There's a lot of fire in my chart. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. So you have a very busy practice. You're still seeing lots
It keeps
of
me
different
going.
patients.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Especially now that I've transitioned to telemedicine, allowed people, especially if you're not feeling well in your body and going out into the world in and of itself is a stressor. I can't tell you, since the advent of COVID, how I've been able to make such a more significant connection to people when they don't have to leave their house.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, I don't wear a white coat and they still have syndrome. And it's just fascinating. Like, no matter what you do, no matter how many crystals or rocks or plants I put in my office, their blood pressure still goes up sometimes. And it's just like, I don't know what to do. So when they're at home, I've just noticed that there's a more thorough opportunity to kind of check in with what's going on, and even kind of see in the background, what's the home life look like? Because I can't tell you how many people have kids running all over the place, and you get it. Oh, so when you talk about stress, I'll have a front row seat as to what stress actually looks like. And that kind of exposure and intimacy, I believe, has only actually helped my ability to understand my patients.
Yeah, I agree. And plus that, you know, even if their home life is chaotic, they are still in their safety nest. So
Right.
The relationship between you, the practitioner, and patient client has to be rooted in safety. And I think with being virtual, even though the human connection is gone a bit, it's still a good environment for having good quality, safe relationships.
Absolutely. Because for some of these people, it's either virtual or they're going to call in and not cancel their appointments before they not call in. And then you're dealing with that as the provider. So there's that. But what I wanted to speak to your question is what I love about my relationship to these two entities, one being the clinic, the other being DesBio, is I feel like I'm in the trenches when I work with people, and I get to see what's presenting, what's working, what's not working. And that gets the wheels turning, like, wow, these products are kind of working well in this regard and they're not working in this regard. I wonder what I could do maybe to either blend these two or add a different ingredient. And then I take it to the DesBio side and I check with other providers and practitioners. Hey, are you guys seeing similar patterns? And I get this kind of data pool from all the DesBio customers as to what's trending clinically, what's presenting, supplementally, what's working, what's not working, what do people want? And then I blend the two together to inspire the formulation process. And then what's super cool is if I'm stumped clinically, I can pull my DesBio customer database for what they've been doing to see what's working, what not working, and then reintegrate that into my clinic. And so they have a reciprocal relationship. They feed each other. And I just been playing that, kind of loved how it worked out.
Yeah, that's amazing. You don't ever get burned out from
Yes.
doing so much? You do. Okay.
Yes, I do. I
So
absolutely do.
you are human. Okay.
Yeah, I take on a lot of the symptoms my patients have at the end of the day. So I have to
Mhm.
be very careful to cleanse because if I don't, I'll be laying at night. Why do I have this nerve twitchy pain going on? I've never had before, and I'll have to sit there. Oh yeah, my patient had that today, and it's just the weirdest thing. And it's because I didn't sever the cord.
Mhm.
They were coming to me in such a state of distress that I just jumped right in, and I didn't put on my life jacket first. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned sever the cord. Are there things that you do to protect yourself energetically? Like how does that
Yes.
routine look like at the end of the day?
Yeah. So in my office, again, there's lavender, there's sage, there's crystals, there's rose quartz. And then when I get home, I will literally bathe. I will take a hot shower. And there's something about watching the bubbles and the suds. In my mind, I visualize kind of whatever I've taken on energetically, or maybe even from an infectious standpoint because they came in sick, going
Mhm.
to the drain. And so there's this visualization of the severing happening. And then after that, I will go ahead and kind of douse myself in some Palo Santo. And then I'll usually kind of take a few deep cleansing breaths.
Yeah, very important to do in this work.
It is.
Amazing. Well, I've really enjoyed talking with you. I'm sure I could ask you like 500 more questions, but maybe we could have another episode later on.
I would
Is
love
it,
that.
yeah, I would love to go into more of like the mental health side of what you do with your clients and patients. I think that would be really helpful since DesBio has a whole mental health line as well.
It really is a cool thing to see. In short, without taking too much more of your time, for a lot of people who are, let me rephrase that, who have experienced trauma or grief, there's either a conscious, but most likely unconscious contraction, closing up happening. And what I love about homeopathy is if you think about in the context of a flower that's closed up, what I love about homeopathy, as opposed to, say, a medication, which just kind of stomps on them and says, get better, get better. Homeopathy is like water from the ground up that causes the flower to bloom and open up.
That's
And
a beautiful
from that
analogy.
standpoint, yeah, when you watch a patient open up, you get all of it. And it's a beautiful thing to see the expression of so much of what has been repressed. And that's the beauty of that modality in the context, especially of talk-based therapy.
Yeah, amazing. Well, it's just been incredible chatting with you. Tell everyone where to find you if they'd like to work with you or about DesBio.
Absolutely. So again, DesBio being mainly a product company, if you have any questions, comments about that, typically they only work with providers. So you'd want to work with a licensed provider in your area. You could ask who your current healthcare providers are, if they currently are registered as a customer with DesBio, or if not, ask them to say, hey, you've heard about this great company you need to know about, get online, set up an account, and get to know them because they're going to change your clinic and they're going to change my life. That's one way. I love patients to be an advocate for change. Don't rely on your doctors to be that voice. You are that voice. And I think it's entirely up to them to speak up. And so please use your voice and advocate in your beliefs and share that with your providers and gently demand that they get DesBio in their practice. Otherwise, I'm already established with DesBio and have that, so you don't need to demand anything. The name of my practice is Northwest Wellness. It is in Federal Way, Washington. And so look that up online and you will see me there.
Amazing. Are you licensed to work with people virtually outside of the state?
Typically what I do is consultations, technically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, same. I'm a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Florida, but I am a life coach everywhere.
Basically, I kind of turn into a glorified nutritionist.
Yeah. People don't care as long as you can help them. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Awesome. Any last words? Any words of wisdom?
No, I want to thank you for your time, for your presence, and just allowing me to be introduced to your audience. I appreciate the opportunity. Even in this virtual world, I try to intentionally see it as a portal. And even though I can't see everybody on the other side of that portal, I definitely feel the energetic connection. And for one, as a human being, I appreciate not feeling alone. I also value the connection and the person who facilitated that, in this case, you. So thank you very much.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you, everyone. I am just so thrilled that you're listening to the Healer Revolution podcast. This has been a huge passion project for me and super therapeutic on top of that, helping me to use my voice and connect with other like-minded individuals. So if you're enjoying the podcast, please like and subscribe. Please share on social media or with your audience or friends or loved ones. I truly appreciate it. It does take a lot of time and financial costs to run the podcast, and it is not a moneymaker, let me tell you. So if you are enjoying this, I would truly appreciate your support just by sending me a post, a like, and a subscribe. Thank you so much.